So continuing with the content of the previous video, what we said is that this one on top was the good example of parallel structure, and that this one down here was the bad example of parallel structure. And we even addressed how a question on the SAT would be structured for that. So then that brings us to the last two examples that I want to run through with students before we start really getting into the nitty gritty of what's next. So moving on to two examples here, I don't expect my students to write this down, but I'd like for you to follow along with these sentences. So example one, we can no longer afford to live beyond our means, nor for a lifestyle that leaves us sad. We must humbly live within our means and look for value in each other that makes us glad. Notice that this said some sentiments, right? These are aphorisms, words of wisdom. Now I'm going to look at the second sentence, which says the exact same thing, but slightly different. We can no longer live beyond our means in a lifestyle that is disappointing. Rather, we should live within our means and seek happiness with each other. Which of the two has a greater impact on the audience? Which one is more likely to stick, the first or the second one? Take a look. The first one. And what made that the case is notice the parallel structure of the comma found in the middle. Also, the repetition of the beginning of the sentence, we. Notice also the repetition of the word means in the middle of the sentence. And notice that the author purposely used rhyming words at the ends of sentences. If anybody is familiar with the O.J. Simpson trial, you will know the famous words. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. One of the reasons that Johnny Cochran's defense of O.J. Simpson was so compelling was because of the use of parallel structure and rhyme. And rhetorically speaking, something like this will have a greater impact and a long-term effect on the audience than, say, if we simply used logical tone and words. Which then brings us to the last example, and this is one I do want my students to write down. This is actually from a famous work by George Orwell, and this comes from his nonfiction piece, and it is Shooting an Elephant, which is a very interesting study in how human beings that are supposed to be in charge are, they think they're in charge, but really the people they're in charge of are in charge of them. But we'll get down to that. I did take liberties too, and I did edit it. He used commas there, but I want you guys to know if you have similar sentences after one another, you can't just put a comma between a complete sentence unless you're Charles Dickens or Orwell, but you should have put a semicolon. So I did edit that. So in the first example, which is a good example of parallel structure, some of the people said that the elephant had gone in one direction. Some said that he had gone in another. Some professed not even to have heard of any elephant. So notice some, some. And then that the elephant, that the, that, or not even to have heard. So in either case, this is a good example of parallel structure because of the beginnings of each sentence matching up. And really, that repetition is all about the absurdity that he's trying to chase this elephant that's gone wild, as opposed to our bad example, which is this one. And the bad example here is some of the people said that the elephant had gone in one direction. Another one said that he had gone in another. A separate group professed not to even have heard of any elephant. The first one we can say is good or better. And the one down here is not as good. And if you had to choose between the two sentences, A or B, the best answer on the SAT would be A, because first, parallel structure is in place, but also which one is shorter by word count? The first one. And that is why we need to know what parallel structure is, and to be able to detect that if you're reading a paragraph and there's a series of sentences written in a similar way, if they ask you to revise the next sentence, the next sentence should be revised to look, sound, and feel like the previous ones. And usually, one of the answers that you would choose, if it had a comma in the middle in the previous two sentences, the third sentence you have to choose from will have a comma in the middle of it. And this is really good stylistic choice. If you become a writer or you write for your English class, you should try using parallel structure when you're trying to make a rhetorical point. You should use repetition sometimes because it lulls the reader into the situation, and then turn a corner and break the parallel structure to get the reader's attention a second time. And that's what separates like a professional writer from people that are just trying to get through school.